The passengers were relaxed, enjoying what felt like an ordinary flight. Clouds drifted peacefully outside the windows, and everything seemed calm, until a sudden shudder ran through the plane. The captain's voice crackled with tension, hinting that something was very wrong. The vibration was small at first, so minor that half the passengers didn't even look up. A few thought it was just a patch of mild turbulence, the kind every flight encounters. But what made people uneasy wasn't the shake, it was the silence that followed. A thick, almost unnatural stillness moved through the cabin, like the air itself was holding its breath. A man in seat 22B pulled off his headphones, frowning as he glanced around. A little girl across the aisle paused her drawing and looked at her mother, sensing the shift even before understanding it. Two businessmen stopped talking mid-sentence. The shudder wasn't the problem. It was the atmosphere, that invisible ripple of tension that spread like a cold wind. Another tremor passed through the aircraft, slightly stronger. This time, it made the overhead bins rattle softly. The flight attendants exchanged quick looks, professional, trained, but undeniably worried. You could see it in their eyes, even though they smiled automatically to calm the passengers. One of them steadied herself by placing a hand on the back of a seat before continuing down the aisle. A third jolt hit, not violent, not dangerous, but sharp enough to snap everyone out of their relaxed state completely. Several people gasped. A glass of water tipped over, spilling onto a tray table. A few passengers instinctively tightened their seatbelts even before being told to. That was when the captain's voice finally returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be experiencing an unexpected disturbance." His voice was controlled, steady, but there was an edge underneath. That edge made people sit straighter. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Flight crews know how to lie with calmness. Pilots know how to mask emergencies behind practiced assurance. But this voice was different. It carried uncertainty. It carried confusion. And confusion from a captain is far more frightening than turbulence. "Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened," he continued. The intercom clicked off. A couple near the front exchanged worried glances. Someone muttered, "This doesn't feel like turbulence." A young boy looked out the window, searching for something, anything that might explain what was happening. But the sky looked perfectly normal. Too normal, peaceful, blue, harmless, not a clue of danger. But the plane shuddered again. A long, slow vibration rolled through the cabin as if something large had passed near the aircraft, disturbing the air around it. A few passengers instinctively looked out their windows again, half expecting to see another plane, a storm, or maybe a flock of birds. But there was nothing except clouds drifting by like white mountains suspended in the sky. Then the lights flickered, only for a second, but that 1 second stretched long enough to make several people suck in their breath. The hum of the engines dipped slightly and then returned to normal. It was nothing catastrophic, but everything felt wrong. The plane wasn't falling, the engines weren't failing, the navigation wasn't off, but something outside, was affecting it. A man in a leather jacket leaned toward the window, squinting at the sky. He whispered, "What the hell is that?" His companion followed his gaze and frowned. Something in the distance shimmered. Not a shape, not a plane, not even an object, just a distortion, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day. A wavy ripple in the air, transparent but visible enough to catch the eye. At first, only the people on the left side of the plane could see it. A soft gasp came from a woman near the wing. She clutched her husband's arm and pointed. He looked, blinking rapidly, not sure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. But the distortion grew clearer. It moved closer, drifting through the sky with uncanny smoothness. Passengers on the right side began leaning toward the aisle, trying to see what the others were staring at. Murmurs spread, rising like static through the cabin. The flight attendants tried to maintain order, but even they were looking toward the windows more than they should have. Another vibration hit the plane, a deep, resonant force that felt less like turbulence and more like proximity. As if something very large was close. Too close. The shimmer in the air expanded, stretching wide like a curtain being pulled open. And then, slowly, impossibly, it revealed form. A dark outline emerged, sharp, angular, metallic. It appeared piece by piece, like a cloaked object glitching into visibility. A massive structure took shape beside the plane, flying parallel to it. Something smooth, something sleek, something not like any aircraft the passengers had ever seen. It was a jet, but not one made for airlines, not one made for commercial travel. It didn't resemble any military jet either. Its shape was too clean, too futuristic, its angles too precise. Its surface caught the sunlight in strange patterns, as if its metal was woven from something beyond ordinary engineering. And it was silent, completely, eerily silent, even though it flew impossibly close. Gasps filled the cabin. People clutched armrests, covering their mouths, pointing, trembling. The little girl in seat 14B whimpered and hid in her mother's arms. A man took out his phone with shaking hands, trying to record, though the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Everyone was staring at the impossible aircraft gliding beside them as though observing them. The captain's voice came on again, tighter now, barely hiding panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. We are aware of the situation." Aware. The word made some passengers laugh nervously. Of course they were aware. There was a giant invisible jet appearing and disappearing beside them. The real question was, what were they supposed to do about it? "Please stay in your seats," the captain said. "We are attempting to contact." The intercom cut out with a crack. The plane jolted again, harder, strong enough to make the cabin lights flicker again. A woman screamed. A suitcase fell from an overhead bin. A flight attendant stumbled but caught herself on a seat. People were crying now, quietly, loudly. Panic doesn't have a single volume. The strange jet outside flickered again, its outline shifting like a mirage, growing sharp then blurry then sharp again. It moved closer, way too close, matching the passenger plane's speed with unnatural precision. The engines of the commercial plane struggled, whining slightly as if something was interfering with the air pressure. Then, without warning, the invisible jet tilted slightly, revealing a row of lights or symbols, glowing faintly, pulsing in a sequence no one could decipher. They weren't letters from any known language. They weren't military markings. They were something else, something that made the skin crawl just by looking at them. Passengers stared in terror. Some clung to each other. Some prayed. Some whispered theories that made no sense. Secret government aircraft, experimental stealth technology, extraterrestrial craft. Every idea felt ridiculous, but none felt impossible anymore. The jet suddenly shot upward, fast, smooth, and silent, vanishing into the clouds above them. Just gone. One moment it was beside them, the next it was swallowed by the sky. Silence filled the cabin again. The passengers waited, breathless, hearts pounding, hoping it was over. Hoping the nightmare had passed. Then the shudder returned, stronger. The plane lurched sharply to the left, making everyone tilt in their seats. Screams erupted. The wings trembled. The engines groaned under the sudden pressure. The captain's voice shouted something over the intercom, but no one could understand the words through the distortion. Outside the window, the sky twisted again. The jet reappeared, above them this time. But now, something else was happening. The air around it warped like liquid. A circular pattern of light spread outward from its center, rippling like a shockwave. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a weapon. It was something else. Something scanning, observing, analyzing. The circular ripple expanded until it washed over the commercial plane with a deep, resonant hum that made everyone cover their ears. Phones flickered. Screens glitched. The cabin lights dimmed. For a moment, everything inside felt weightless, like gravity had loosened. When the hum faded, the passengers opened their eyes slowly, breath shaking. The jet wasn't attacking. It was studying them, watching them, evaluating something, and then, once again, it disappeared. This time completely. The plane stabilized. The engines returned to normal. The sky outside looked peaceful again, disturbingly peaceful. But the passengers were anything but. Their minds raced, their bodies trembled, their hearts struggled to return to rhythm. The captain finally returned to the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an emergency landing." His voice was hollow, shaken. He knew something the passengers didn't. He had seen something on the instruments, on the radar, on whatever readings pilots have access to. Something he did not dare explain. "We will be on the ground soon," he said. "Please remain calm." But calm was impossible now. Because everyone on that plane knew. It wasn't malfunction. It wasn't turbulence. It wasn't imagination. Something had found them in the sky. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. And it might not be gone. A few passengers gasped as a strange distortion appeared in the sky beside them, shimmering, bending the light, like heat waves floating in the air. Within seconds, a massive shape became visible. An invisible jet, cloaked in some unknown technology, was flying right next to their plane. At first, the distortion looked harmless, almost beautiful, like sunlight dancing through a curtain of hot air. But the shimmer thickened, stretching like a veil being pushed aside. The clouds warped around it, bending unnaturally as if the sky itself was reacting to the presence of something enormous. People leaned toward the windows, eyes widening, breath catching. A few lifted their phones with trembling hands, but most simply stared, frozen between awe and fear. The distortion pulsed, the edges sharpened, a faint metallic outline began forming, a silhouette too clean, too perfect to be anything natural. Something sleek, something impossibly engineered. A jet that was not meant to be seen suddenly revealed itself in pieces, like a puzzle assembling midair. The surface of the craft became clear, then vanished, then reappeared again with glitch-like flickers, as though its cloaking device was malfunctioning under the strain of staying hidden at such close range. The jet glided with eerie precision, matching the speed and altitude of the commercial aircraft effortlessly. No noise, no exhaust trail, nothing to suggest mechanical propulsion. It moved like a shadow given mass, a ghost made metal. A man near the window pressed his hand against the glass as if touching it would confirm reality. "What is that?" he whispered, voice cracking. He didn't expect an answer, but several passengers leaned closer anyway, as though they might decipher the craft by staring hard enough. Even the children, who moments earlier were coloring or watching cartoons, stared with round, blinking eyes. They sensed the fear of the adults, and fear is contagious. The jet shimmered again, and the cloak flickered off completely for a moment. Everyone saw it clearly, a long, dark body with wings shaped like blades, edges sharp enough to cut the air cleanly. Strange symbols ran along its hull, glowing faintly with soft pulses of blue-white light. They weren't numbers. They weren't letters from any alphabet known to civilians. They pulsed like a heartbeat. A living pattern, a message no one could read. The woman in seat 11F covered her mouth, tears welling. A man in a military jacket muttered, "That's not ours." His voice shook with the certainty of someone who had seen classified aircraft, someone who knew this was beyond anything Earth's militaries had publicly revealed. Passengers whispered frantic theories: secret experiment, prototype stealth aircraft, extraterrestrial craft, government cover-up, but no theory made sense. Nothing explained the silent engine-less glide, the seamless cloak, or the symbols glowing like cold stars. Outside, the jet drifted closer, too close. The commercial plane's fuselage vibrated gently, reacting to the subtle but undeniable shift in air pressure. The wings dipped slightly before stabilizing. The pilots must have been fighting to maintain smooth flight. Some passengers didn't feel the shift, but others sensed it instantly. The air wasn't normal anymore. It felt charged, heavy, electric. The jet was studying them. A lens-like structure appeared on its underside, rotating slowly until it faced the passenger windows. It wasn't a weapon, it didn't glow with destructive power. But the precision with which it aligned felt intentional. Like an eye focusing, like something intelligent was observing the humans through the transparent shell of their metal tube. The temperature inside the cabin seemed to drop. Goosebumps rose on arms. Someone whispered a prayer. The flight attendants exchanged terrified glances. They tried to hide behind professional smiles that no longer convinced anyone. One attendant subtly held onto a seat as if bracing for something she couldn't name. The lens pulsed once, soft blue light sliding across the jet's surface in a ripple. The commercial plane's cabin lights flickered at the same moment, synchronized in a way that felt deliberate. Phones glitched. A few screens went black. Others displayed static. A passenger yelled in panic as his tablet froze with a high-pitched whine. The lens pulsed again. This time the ripple spread wider, extending along the jet's body like a wave traveling through liquid metal. The air between the two aircraft shimmered. Some passengers rubbed their arms, feeling a static-like sensation prickling their skin, like invisible electricity brushing over them. The plane vibrated, not violently, but steadily, like something was scanning it, probing it. The captain's voice returned through the intercom, tight and breathless. "Ladies and gentlemen, stay seated. Do not, repeat, do not, interfere with your electronic devices. We are assessing." The audio cut out before he could finish. Panic spread quickly. People cried out. A man demanded answers. A woman whispered, "We're not supposed to see this. We're not supposed to be here." Another person insisted the military would appear any moment. But no one appeared. No jets from below. No radio calls breaking through. No rescue. Nothing but the silent giant beside them. The passengers watched helplessly as the invisible jet drifted even closer. They could now see tiny details, lines on the metallic hull, faint patterns like circuitry etched with microscopic precision. Its surface didn't reflect sunlight normally. Instead, light slid off it in strange distortions, as if the metal was absorbing some wavelengths and bending others. It wasn't painted. It wasn't coated. It was something no human had seen before. A child asked her father, "Is it a monster?" The father shook his head, though his voice trembled. "No, sweetheart, it's just something advanced." His lie sounded flimsy even to himself. The jet mirrored the plane's motions exactly. When the commercial aircraft dipped slightly, the jet dipped. When it leveled out, the jet matched it exactly, staying an impossible 30 meters away, far too close for safety. Yet the pilots could do nothing. The jet wasn't threatening them, but it wasn't leaving either. It moved with purpose, with intelligence. The scanning ripple pulsed once more. This time, passengers felt it in their bones. A deep hum vibrated through the cabin, as though sound was traveling through their skeletons instead of the air. People covered their ears instinctively, but it didn't help. The hum wasn't heard, it was felt. Lights flickered. The engines groaned. The plane dipped suddenly, just a few feet, but enough to make passengers scream. The pilots regained control, leveling it out, but the fear in the cabin spiked. Someone demanded the pilot explain what was happening. But the intercom stayed silent. The jet outside rotated slightly, the lens shifting its angle. The symbols on its body brightened, flaring brighter than before. Some passengers recoiled from the windows. Others watched in horrified fascination. A man recorded everything through his window. His phone glitched with pixelated flashes, but the image held. Others followed, shakily holding up their devices, desperate to capture proof of what they were witnessing. But when one passenger zoomed in on the symbols, their phone abruptly shut off, not powered down, not crashed, just instantly dead. A woman sobbed, clutching her sleeping toddler. "Why us?" she whispered into his hair, though the child slept through it all, oblivious to the world shaking around him. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man with a scientific mind tried to make sense of the jet's patterns, muttering hypotheses under his breath. His logic collapsed with each second as the jet displayed capabilities beyond anything human. Suddenly, the jet tilted upward, angling its nose toward the sky. Its symbols flashed in a synchronized pattern. The lens retracted with a metallic slide so smooth it sounded like nothing mechanical at all. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, silent, clean, instantaneous, the entire craft shot upward into the clouds. It didn't accelerate. It didn't build speed. It simply moved, one moment beside them, the next a streak of distortion slicing through the sky. Within seconds, it vanished into the upper atmosphere, leaving only shimmering air behind. Silence filled the cabin. It was the kind of silence that hurt. The kind that pulsed with fear, disbelief, and 1,000 unanswered questions. People stared out the windows long after the jet disappeared, waiting for it to return. Hoping it wouldn't, praying it would, because the alternative, the mystery, felt more terrifying than the threat itself. Some passengers began to cry openly. Others shook, staring at their hands, their feet, the floor, anything but the sky. The pilots didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Then the captain's voice returned, unsteady. We are diverting to the nearest airport. Stay calm. We will land shortly." But calm didn't exist anymore. Everyone on board knew the truth. Something watched them. Something examined them. Something that wasn't supposed to be real. And they had no idea if it was coming back. Panic spread through the cabin. Parents held their children tight, phones recorded shaky footage, and flight attendants struggled to keep everyone calm. The mysterious jet stayed perfectly aligned with them, matching their speed, as if scanning or observing the plane. The air inside felt tight, heavy with fear, as though every breath had to fight its way into people's lungs. Screams blended with prayers, gasps with desperate whispers. No one knew what to do. No one knew what could be done. A mother in row 18 shoved her crying toddler's face into her shoulder, rocking back and forth as though movement alone could protect them. Across the aisle, a teenage girl held her younger brother's hand so tightly his fingers turned pale. His eyes stayed locked on the window, unable to look away from the impossible aircraft drifting beside them like a silent ghost. The jet's presence was overwhelming. Its shape, hidden and revealed through shifting distortions, felt unnatural, almost predatory. Every passenger could sense it. An instinctive alarm rang deep inside their bones. Something was wrong. Something was watching them, studying them with the cold curiosity of a scientist examining an insect in a glass jar. A businessman in the front cabin tried to stand, yelling that he needed to speak to the pilot, but a flight attendant rushed forward and pushed him back into his seat, her voice trembling as she insisted he remain seated. Her hands shook so badly the safety manual she held trembled like paper in a storm. She kept glancing toward the windows, unable to hide her fear even behind her trained expressions. The cabin crew had faced turbulence, emergency landings, even medical crises, but nothing like this. The jet outside made no effort to hide itself anymore. It hovered in perfect alignment with the commercial plane, as though tethered by invisible forces. No vibrations came from it, no sound, no engines roaring. Its movements were impossibly smooth, too smooth to belong to any earthly aircraft. Even the military man sitting near the rear section had given up trying to explain it, staring with a pale, locked expression, hands clenched so tightly around the armrests that his knuckles had turned bone white. Phones across the cabin continued recording, though many devices glitched with static or flickered with strange distortions whenever the jet's symbols pulsed. A woman tried to livestream, only to scream when her camera froze mid-frame, showing pixels twisting into strange geometric shapes before her phone abruptly shut off. The jet's hull flickered again, revealing a dark metallic surface covered in unfamiliar markings, smooth curves, sharp angles, glowing runes that seemed alive. They pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, like breathing, like communication. A few passengers instinctively leaned back from the windows, afraid the symbols might be looking back at them. A ripple of tremors moved through the entire plane. Lights flickered in an eerie rhythm, matching the glow from the symbols on the mysterious craft. The overhead screens glitched, briefly showing static, then unfamiliar patterns, circles, lines, pulsing shapes that didn't match any known interface. They disappeared quickly, but not quickly enough to convince passengers it was coincidence. The captain's voice attempted to crackle through the intercom again, but it came through distorted, broken, as if something outside was interfering. Ladies and stay calm. We evaluating. The message cut out abruptly, replaced by a deep humming vibration that made the cabin rattle. People covered their ears in pain, though the sound wasn't loud, it was low, resonant, felt more through bone than ear. Passengers screamed. A man knocked over his water bottle, watching helplessly as it rolled down the aisle, bouncing with every vibration. The jet's lens-like structure rotated again, focusing directly on the plane's windows. It reminded some of an eye, others of a scanner, but all agreed it was sentient in some way. It was looking at them. Not at the aircraft, at the people inside it. Staring straight into the cabin as though it could see through metal and glass in panic. A child pointed at it with wide eyes and whispered, "It's trying to talk to us." A ripple of terror moved through the aisle. One passenger leaned toward the window, trying to observe the jet more closely. He could see the strange shimmering field around it, an invisible shell-bending light like a living cloak. When he raised his hand toward the window, the jet's symbols brightened again, pulsing faster. He jerked his hand back, heart pounding. A flight attendant tried to instruct passengers to put their devices away, shouting above the rising chaos. But people ignored her. Some recorded, some prayed, some simply stared in absolute numb shock. A few passengers near the back crouched down as if bracing for impact even though the plane remained steady in the sky. The jet began drifting even closer, coming dangerously near the left wing. The metal of the wing vibrated with unusual force, almost as though the jet's energy field was brushing against it. The pilot must have felt the shift immediately, because the entire commercial airplane dipped slightly, stabilizing only after a stomach-turning jolt. A few passengers cried out as seatbelts dug into their hips and shoulders. The scanning lens of the mysterious jet shifted position, aligning with the cockpit for a brief second. The pilots inside must have felt the pressure, the heaviness of being watched, the sense that this entity was not just observing the plane but evaluating their intentions. The plane's external lights flickered again, and something beeped loudly from the cockpit, something so sharp and unnatural that even the passengers heard it. Then the jet pulled back a few meters, hovering again like a silent, floating giant. People dared to breathe again. For a moment, a fragile hope fluttered in the cabin. Maybe it was done. Maybe whatever it wanted was finished. But the jet wasn't finished. A new sequence of glowing symbols lit up along its hull. The patterns grew brighter, more rapid, spinning like illuminated streaks across the metallic skin of the craft. The lens pulsed a deep, resonant blue. The light washed across the side of the commercial plane, illuminating the faces of passengers with an otherworldly glow. Every electronic device inside the cabin malfunctioned at once. Screens flashed, turned white, then crashed. Headphones blasted with static. Tablets rebooted. Some passengers dropped their devices in panic, seeing sparks fly from their charging ports. A boy's game console emitted a strange buzzing hum before going completely dark. The jet wasn't simply watching anymore. It was interacting. The cabin shook again. Lights dimmed to a dull flicker. A smell of warm metal filled the air, subtle yet unmistakable. A man shouted, "We're losing power." A flight attendant yelled back, "Stay calm. Please stay calm." But her voice cracked in the middle, betraying her own terror. The jet shifted its position once more, lowering itself to the same altitude as the plane's belly, flying just beneath the commercial aircraft. Passengers on the right side looked down only to recoil immediately, because the jet was so close now that they could see intricate layers of machinery, rotating panels, mechanical components that moved like living tissue. Technology that felt too advanced to be mechanical, too organic to be synthetic. A woman fainted. A teenager cried into her hands. Two men argued whether this was a military test gone wrong or a first contact scenario. Theories collided with each other like panicked thoughts in a burning building. The jet rose again, taking its place beside the plane, maintaining that perfectly parallel formation. The cabin grew unbearably quiet. Even the crying subsided into shallow breathing. Everyone sensed the moment was building toward something final, something decisive. Then the lens brightened one last time. A beam-like ripple emerged from it, not a weapon, not a laser, but a wave, shimmering like soft light passing through water. It spread toward the plane slowly, gracefully, almost gently. People screamed as it approached, covering their faces, ducking, bracing for pain. The ripple passed through the plane like a ghost. No fire, no explosion, no damage, but every person it touched felt it. In their head, in their bones, in their memories. It felt like a hand brushing through their mind. Images flickered, childhood, school, relationships, faces of loved ones. Random memories flashed like film reels spinning out of control. Every passenger reacted differently. Some gasped, some cried, some clutched their heads. Then the ripple faded. The jet flickered, and then, in the blink of an eye, it shot upward with unimaginable speed, vanishing through the atmosphere like a bullet disappearing into water. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving a silence so profound it felt unreal. Passengers sat frozen in shock. No one moved, no one spoke. The entire cabin felt suspended in the aftermath of something impossible. A full minute passed before the captain's voice finally returned, his tone trembling. "This is your captain. We have no explanation for what just occurred. We are diverting immediately. Please remain seated. We are going to land as soon as possible." But no one was calm. No one was okay, because every person on that plane knew something deeply unsettling. The jet didn't attack them. It didn't damage the plane. It didn't try to hide. It scanned them. It studied them. It chose them. And as the sky returned to its normal peaceful blue, each passenger wondered the same horrifying thing. What if it wasn't finished? The moment the invisible jet vanished, a heavy silence fell over the entire cabin, the kind that settles only after a shock so deep that the mind refuses to process it. For a few seconds, no one spoke. People looked at one another as if hoping someone else had the explanation they didn't. The air inside the cabin felt different, thicker, charged with something unspoken, as though everyone's senses were still echoing with the afterimage of what they had witnessed. The engines hummed steadily beneath the floor, but even that familiar vibration felt foreign now. It wasn't just a regular flight anymore. It was a moment ripped straight from the unknown, leaving every passenger suspended between fear and disbelief. A woman sitting near the wing finally broke the silence by whispering that she had captured the last few seconds of the mysterious shape on her phone. The people around her leaned in, their voices hushed, their movements slow and uncertain. Some hands trembled as they held onto armrests, while others clutched rosaries, necklaces, or anything they believed might bring them comfort. A man in business attire wiped his forehead repeatedly, staring at the seat in front of him as though the fabric itself might hold answers. Children, sensing the fear of the adults, sat unusually still, their eyes wide and searching. The captain's voice returned, firmer this time but carrying an undertone of strain. He announced that they would be making an emergency landing at the nearest airport and urged everyone to remain seated, but his words only deepened the tension. His tone made it clear that he had seen something too, something that protocol didn't cover, something that no training in his long career had prepared him for. Flight attendants exchanged glances not meant to be seen by passengers. Their tight smiles and forced calm betrayed the truth. They were just as frightened as everyone else. As the plane descended, the mood shifted from shock to speculation. People began to speak in hurried whispers, each voice carrying a different theory. Some insisted it had to be a top-secret military aircraft using advanced cloaking technology. Others argued that no technology on Earth could bend light the way that shimmering distortion had. One elderly passenger claimed she had read reports of similar sightings around the world, always near airplanes, always brief, always unexplained. Her voice quivered with conviction as she told those around her that governments knew far more than they admitted. A younger man countered with the idea of experimental stealth drones. Another shook his head and muttered that the jet moved too intelligently, too deliberately, as though it were aware of their presence. A woman in the front section whispered that maybe it wasn't human at all. Her voice barely rose above the hum of the engines, yet the suggestion traveled quickly through the rows. For a moment, the entire cabin seemed to inhale as one. The idea wasn't impossible, just terrifying. The way the jet had matched their speed, the perfect alignment, the eerie silence of its appearance and disappearance, it all fed into the fear that something far beyond human understanding had brushed past them in the sky. As the plane lowered through the clouds, turbulence shook them gently, and a wave of nausea passed through several passengers. Some closed their eyes, gripping their armrests. Others stared out the windows, searching the sky for any sign that the invisible jet might return. Every flicker of sunlight, every flash of reflected glare made hearts jump. Yet the sky remained empty, deceptively peaceful, as though nothing extraordinary had happened at all. When the runway finally came into view, relief rushed through the cabin like a quiet exhale. The landing gear lowered with a heavy thump, and the plane glided toward the ground. The wheels touched down with a jolt that sent a ripple through everyone's bodies. Even then, no one felt entirely safe. The unknown had followed them through the clouds, and its presence lingered in every heartbeat. As the plane rolled to a stop, emergency vehicles swarmed around it immediately, fire trucks, ambulances, security vans. Their flashing lights painted the windows in strokes of red and white. Passengers exchanged uneasy looks. The authorities had been alerted. That alone was unsettling. Something about the response felt too quick, too prepared, as if someone had been waiting for an incident exactly like this. When the doors finally opened, the scent of jet fuel and warm asphalt rushed inside. The passengers were escorted out row by row, not through the standard jet bridge but down a mobile staircase into a cordoned-off section of the tarmac. Uniformed personnel guided them toward a temporary enclosure set up with medical staff, security officers, and devices that no one recognized. Some passengers asked questions, but most were too shaken to speak. They simply followed instructions, their minds replaying the shimmering distortion beside the plane over and over. In the medical tent, doctors checked vital signs while officials took statements. Some passengers gave shaky descriptions, others broke down mid-sentence, and a few refused to talk at all, insisting they wanted to go home immediately. A woman who had recorded footage found her phone taken for analysis, though she argued desperately to keep it. A scientist among the passengers tried to explain how light distortion could occur naturally, but even he sounded unconvinced by his own words. Hours passed as everyone waited, restless and exhausted. Rumors spread like wildfire, some believable, others outrageous. Theories of extraterrestrial surveillance circulated through whispered conversations. Some argued it had to be a military craft from a rival nation. Others spoke in hushed tones about interdimensional travel. With every new theory, the fear in the tent deepened. When the passengers were finally released, they stepped back into the world changed forever. Family members rushed to embrace them, reporters shouted questions from behind barricades, and flashing cameras lit up their dazed expressions. Yet no matter how many microphones were pushed toward them, most found themselves unable to describe the event in a way that made sense. How could they? The mind could only stretch so far to explain something that defied all logic. In the days that followed, the story spread across the globe. News outlets speculated endlessly, experts offered explanations that contradicted one another, and online forums exploded with theories. Governments denied involvement. Scientists dismissed the reports as misinterpretations. But the passengers knew the truth of what they had seen. And every time they closed their eyes, the shimmering distortion returned, the impossible image of a jet that existed and didn't exist at the same time. Some passengers suffered nightmares, others avoided flying altogether. A few became obsessed, researching aviation anomalies and classified projects. A man from the flight claimed he saw patterns in the way the jet moved. Another believed the encounter had been intentional, as if the mysterious aircraft had been observing them for reasons they could not fathom. But the most haunting part was not what they knew. It was what they didn't. The jet had appeared without warning, watched them in silence, then vanished into thin air as if slipping into a dimension just outside human perception. No one could say whether it had been a one-time anomaly or the beginning of something larger. One thing remained certain for every soul on that plane. There was nothing normal about that flight, and the sky would never feel the same again.